Top 100 mailbag episode of the Call Up. I'm Arm Layton. He's Jack McMullen, and we fielded your questions on Twitter mostly, a little bit of Instagram, a little bit of everywhere. Thank you so much for all of the questions that were fired away. I'm going to spend some time later today getting to the questions on Twitter and Instagram that maybe we didn't get to in the episode, because I do want to answer as many as we can on this Top 100 update, since there was so much movement and there were so many new faces. Of course, as always, the episode or the article is linked in the episode description. Jack, there's one thing I want to start with before we get into the top 100, and it's Southern League numbers again. I didn't think we'd be talking about the AA Southern League, which is one of the smaller leagues, it's only 8 teams. Yeah. And last year, because of that, I think they figured, this is a great place to treat the players as guinea pigs. So they used the tax baseballs, as you may remember last year, through the first half of the season, spit out some egregious numbers that we would get from fastballs, induced vertical break, all that good stuff. Quickly, they realized this is not going to work. We didn't hear about it, and they haven't really done anything with it since. There was a total drop-off in Ks when they pulled the ball out of circulation. I believe it was like July 9th. No words on anything ball-wise this year, right? Like as far as we're concerned, it's back to normal stuff. But I noticed something weird. And I'd had some people tweeting at me like, hey, I've kind of noticed that some of the players in the Southern League have a 760 OPS and their WRC plus is like 130. And then I was looking at Matt Shaw. And Matt Shaw's a guy that if you look at the slash line, seems like he's struggling. But if you look at the WRC plus, he's doing just fine. So I dove deeper into it. We got some weird stuff, Jack. So since 1988, I went and pulled all of the lowest slugging percentages by individual teams. 8 teams every year since 1988. 3 of the teams in this year's league have the lowest slugging percentage since 1988. Mississippi at 305, Rocket City at 308, Biloxi at 316. 5 of the 8 teams are in the bottom 11 since 1988. It's early. We'll see, but it's pretty weird.
Yeah, fully coincidence. Let's move on. How is it not to do with the baseballs? They're going to do some weird shit to the Southern League, and I feel so bad for Southern League prospects. And, again, we had such a disclaimer with Southern League pitching prospects.
It sucked.
It sucked. You can't properly assess. And we gave Owen Casey bonus points for hitting 290 with tack balls for half the year. And we gave Jefferson Carroll bonus points for holding his own as a youngin with tack baseballs for half the year. Are we giving guys bonus points for a 670 OPS now in the Southern League? We need this stuff to be readily available to us. Yeah. And it took essentially a tell-all from Baseball America breaking the news that they were using tack baseballs in the Southern League. Yeah. It was not announced. It was a BA article. I wanted to know
beat us to the punch. And they'd been doing it. They'd been mixing them in for a little bit before that too. I had players tell me year before that every once in a while they'd get some weird balls mixed in that were different. And I think we were going to do it. Baseball America, of course, because they're on it and they're the gold standard, beat us. And they had a whole detailed, amazing piece on it that really opened our eyes to another degree too. But after that and the optics of that, I don't want to put the tinfoil cap on, but would you be surprised if they said, hey, let's keep this closer to our vest. We don't tell anybody. The pitchers aren't going to know the difference. And let's try a different baseball here that maybe, I don't know what the difference is here, but clearly it's not flying as far. I just find it hard to believe that slugging is down across the whole league. And I know that I know you got a really good pitching staff over there in Birmingham. I don't think that they're calling everybody across the entire league. Do you think it's conspiracy theorists to say that they're using some dead baseballs out there? Or do you think that it's just a slow start and coincidental in the league? When I see 4 or 3 of the lowest since 1988, consecutively 3, if it was mixed in there, the first worst and the 6th and the 8th, maybe it's just a slow start this year and the pitching's good in the league. But when it's 1, 2, and 3, and then 5 and 11, it's something's up.
I would be curious to see kind of a dive into EV and launch where balls are ending up. Like, hey, this ball was hit 108 at 29 and it didn't get out. Like that's really where I'd be sounding the alarms, I think.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious about that kind of data in the Southern League, but I think like the historical significance you bring to this makes me think it's far beyond a coincidence.
Yeah.
It's, 3 of the bottom, 8 since 1988. Like when you have to go back that far and it's that drastic, that passes any level of coincidence.
It's 3 of the bottom 3 since 1988, and then you got 5 of 11. The last thing I'll mention is you got a slugging percentage of 341 in this league right now. It's a 652 OPS. The league average OPS is 652. And some of these environments are really favorable to hit. And I look at Biloxi. And Biloxi, that's a place we've seen that place be a launch pad, especially to the left field. And Biloxi's one of the lowest slugging percentages we've seen in the league's history since we've been tracking this thing. 700 OPS last year, a slugging percentage of 400 last year. So 60 points lower. Pretty weird. So I would say we don't totally know what's going on, but for whatever reason, I would take some of the offensive output with a grain of salt from some of these guys there. And that is an Edgar Caro, that has not produced the same way this year as he did last year, though he has been heating up. That is a Matt Shaw. I think that is some of the other guys in that league, a Jacob Marcy, a Nathan Martorella, who started to struggle the second they left the other league. And I think that's an interesting case study too. Both of them are swinging it better now. So I think that is an interesting wrinkle in it, but we've got a lot of questions to get to, so we might as well jump right into them. Jack, do you want to lead us through the questions? You want me to lead us through them? How do you want to go about it?
I'm happy to lead us through. Real quick, what'd you say the league average OPS was in the Southern League?
641.
695 in the Eastern League.
Or sorry, it's 652, excuse me.
695 in the Eastern League. You should not see a 45-point drop-off in OPS from one quote-unquote pitcher-friendly league in AA to the other quote-unquote pitcher-friendly league in AA.
Yeah, how many runs a game? Do you have that in front of you?
4.48.
3.81.
Dude.
That's
not
bad.
What's
slug for AA?
What's the slug?
The slug is 341.
Yeah, 370.
Big difference.
Huge difference.
That's weird stuff. We will be digging. I will be doing some investigative journalism here and figure out what the hell is going on.
Also, how about the 2 most electric call-ups in Major League Baseball history before we get into these questions? DJ Hers and Duke Ellis. DJ Hers of the Nats.
Duke Ellis got called up?
Yeah. DJ Hers is up for the Nats. He'll make his Major League debut, I assume, as a starter. He had a good start last week. He might have had 2 good starts last week. And then Duke Ellis, the breaking news report, James Fegan, who is at Sox Machine, sources confirm the White Sox are calling up outfielder Duke Ellis from AA, 26-year-old hitting 258, 341, 308, but is a speed and defense merchant. Called him a merchant.
Merchant?
Yeah, I know. 34 for 35 and stolen bases on the season.
Well, he is in the Southern League, so cut him some slack.
Yeah.
In the slugging department. He flies. But making that jump from AA is pretty absurd. I thought he was an org guy, to be honest.
Yeah, he's a big league.
I'm really happy. I mean, that is awesome for him. Another rare instance where, not that rare, I guess, on the Cape, but technically a Katuitt Kettleer on that 2019 team. So another big leaguer on that 2019 team, but he did get cut and then go to Brewster for the second half of that season. But that is another Peter Flaherty created masterpiece over there, another big leaguer out of that 2019 Katuitt Kettleers ball club. So
there we go.
Congratulations to Duke Ellis. And I mean, who would have thought? So that's really exciting. And then Hers, let's see what happens, man. Like, what can happen when he's on. The stuff is crazy. I haven't seen what he's done lately. Oh, well, he's coming off of a start against St. Paul where he went 5 in a third, 1 run, 2 hits, 10 Ks. So I'm pumped. Let's see what he can do. It's with where the Nationals are at. I think it's a great time to give him a shot.
100%. All right, let's jump into this mailbag here. I've got 11 questions between X and Instagram. First one comes from X. This is at Charlie's with a 4 instead of an A on X. Love the work. So, hey, how about
Thank you.
Golf clap arm. Love the work. How much do you guys analyze potential split issues in prospects analysis? More for left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters, just because they see less LHP in minors. We see teams platoon players now, even top/former top prospects. He cited Lux, Beatty, Evan Carter. Torque got optioned because of struggles versus right-handed pitching.
Mm-hmm. Excellent question. I think this bakes into the conversation that you and I have been kind of actively having as we continue to try to kind of conceptualize the way we want to approach prospect analysis and rankings and things like that. And it's the role aspect. So I think it really depends on the player and what their role is going to be. For certain players, when we were talking about Tanner Schobel of the Twins, that's everything because he needs to demolish lefties because that kind of seems like the role he would be in. He's not going to, if you look at it cumulatively against lefties and righties, he's not going to be a guy that slugs a ton. He might not hit enough to be an everyday player, but if he can absolutely mash lefties, then there's a role for him as a versatile infielder. A James Wood, who's a left-handed hitter, who would be crushing the predominant, larger sample of what he's going to see, even though you're going to see more lefties in Major League Baseball, he's so good and so talented, and the ceiling is so high that I think it would probably be a 10% consideration, if that, because there's so many really good players that are so dominant against righties that the shorter side of that platoon, as long as they have good plate discipline and get by, you can make that happen and you can survive just fine. So I think it depends on the player and it depends on what they do. So like if it's a guy with great plate discipline, I won't be as worried about the splits because, as you always say, Jack, walks don't slump. So if you're going to hit 150 against lefties, but you get on base at a 320 clip, that's fine as if you're pulverizing righties. Right. So I think it's very case by case, but I also think it really depends on the role. If it's a hit tool driven guy, I don't want to see splits. Yeah. That's a big part of it. If it's reverse splits or, again, it's a right-handed situation where, you're not hitting as well against guys that you're going to see more of. That's of course going to be a factor, but left on left, I really don't care too much unless it's a very hit tool driven guy. I mean, even Luis Arias doesn't have the best splits against lefties. And, I think that doesn't really hold him back much.
Right. I feel like it's something that, you take into account. Yeah. I feel like the only time you dock a guy for splits is if it is like egregious and you are an absolute liability. And, there are very few guys, especially in the top 100, that are absolute liabilities against one-handedness of pitching. If you've got a left-handed hitter that, is OPSing under 500 against left-handed pitching, then you start to sound the alarms. But I feel like if it's, 150 point drop off in OPS or something, and a guy like, hey, he's got a 900 OPS against right-handed pitching, but he's down to, 690 or 700, it's something to monitor, but he's not a liability.
Yeah, I think that's a great wrinkle in it as well. Is it can't be egregious, right? It can't be a situation where, because it can be like, he could still be a top prospect, but you have to evaluate the role. Like Jock Peterson, extremely talented player, extremely valuable, has made a lot of money and has accumulated enough WAR and is a successful big leaguer, but you have to adapt what maybe that role will look like as a big leaguer because you can't put him left on left. So that means he's taking the bulk of a platoon, and that caps his upside from a WAR perspective and just an overall value. So that doesn't mean he's not a top 100 guy, but that would maybe hold him back from the tier one. And I think you really start to split those hairs when you get to the top tier players. And I think that's where, you can start to see that matter a little bit more because we're separating guys within, a couple percentage points of things at that point. But I think it's a really good question. And ultimately it is case by case, but when guys are able to keep it from, being egregious, like you said, it's mostly worth putting up with maybe some struggles left on left.
100%. All right. Next question that we've got comes from @Dejinja34. I think he has red hair. Also, David Ortiz fan, 34, right? He asks, this was on X, by the way. What do you see the best move for the Brewers to do with Jefferson Caro since they have a top 3 catcher in baseball locked up for the next few years? Similar question to Tyler Black, as it seems like he's blocked at the moment. Should they wait it out until there's more clarity at first base? Again, that's Dejinja34 on X/Twitter. Caro, I think, is a fascinating conversation. Black, I don't know. Like, I feel like that's the kind of guy, because he's middle back end of the top 100, you figure out a place to get his bat in the lineup. Caro, so much of his value is defensively. He won the minor league Gold Glove last year, and you've got a guy that, is running with Adley Rutschman as the best catcher in baseball at the moment in William Contreras, who I think just hit arbitration. It is a fascinating question. The Brewers can put it on the back burner because Caro's out for the entire year. Next year, he'll open in AAA because he only has 5-6 games in AAA under his belt, or maybe even less than that. I
don't even know if he got to triple.
He did. He got hurt in AAA.
Oh, true. So it would have been 2 games.
It was 2 games,
a game and a half.
There you go. So second game of the season. So he will open next year in AAA, but they're going to hit a decision around the All-Star break next year. And how do you think they should approach that decision?
I think Black, it seems like there's a more direct path to ABs for when you look at the situation, especially when you're probably going to lose a couple infielders in general. And we'll see, just how they decide to go about some of the things in this offseason. Black, I think, is a pretty easier. You'll find a spot for him and he'll find an opportunity, I think, next year. Caro is an interesting one because you don't find catchers like this often, where you have elite defensive potential, above average power. The guy makes a lot of contact, and that's why he's been a top 30 prospect for us for a while here. Like, he's a special talent. But at the same time, where does he fit in now that William Contreras has also turned into a really solid defender? Do you split time there and get Contreras off of his, out of the crouch a little bit? Maybe. But Caro, as you mentioned, is a guy that gives you so much value by playing consistently back there and giving you just defensive ability, period. So I think the good news is that they have another year now to sort this out of something so bad with the shoulder issue. And he's going to come back next year, and then he's going to need to play, that during the year and still prove through a full season that he's ready. But let's operate under the assumption, Jack, that he does that, right? He comes back, his shoulder's right, and he ends up playing really well. And we're in July. You obviously call him up to help, make your push, and you have 2 really talented catchers, and we saw that, happen in Toronto. And we also see in Toronto how quickly things can turn on their head. I don't think that happens with a William Contreras, but he could get hurt. You never know what can happen. And then the drop off is so dramatic because the difference between starter and backup catcher in Major League Baseball is probably as dramatic as any position in the sport. And, the teams that have a guy waiting in the wings like that always have the edge, and it's a different level of depth that nobody can really match. You want to have that, but how do you get any value out of Caro if he's not catching 4 days a week? So I wish I had an answer, but I don't really know. I think part of it probably has to go with, do they feel like they can extend William Contreras? Because think about it, you're going to have another year here of control eaten up, and then you're going to have another year next year eaten up. So like Caro can be in that backup role for a year or 2 or a year and a half, and you'll find ways to filter him in, knowing that he will be your guy next because you can't pay William Contreras. I think that's going to ultimately be the way they go about it. And I think we'll start to see Contreras catch a little bit less, DH a little bit more. And it'll be frustrating that Caro does not catch as much as he should, but it's just going to be the circumstance. And I think ultimately that's going to be what they do, because it seems unlikely that they pay a Contreras. Maybe they do, knowing that the Yelich deal will be starting to come to an end there. All of their other guys are very controllable. They're pitching, they didn't pay Burns. Maybe that'll be the way they go about it. But I think that makes the most sense to me, man.
I don't think they pay William. I think your thinking is spot on. I think when he gets too expensive, and he's making the minimum right now, or a little bit over the minimum, he's at $766.9 at this point. But ARB1 is next year. And Caro, you think, can spend at least half the year in AAA when he's back healthy next year. If he comes up, he shows well, you can start to survey the market going into ARB2 for Contreras. But he's going to get too expensive. He's going to come in at a very high number in ARB1 next year. And he's going to get that very high number because he is a top 2, top 3 catcher in the game. I think they are going to get priced out of him, much similar to how I think it's going to go with Devin Williams. I think they're going to get priced out of Devin Williams in ARB3 next year. And I think that this offseason is the one that they move Devin Williams in, because he's going to be a very expensive ARB3, and they're not going to pay him in free agency. I think the Brewers operate a lot more similarly to the Rays than many may, expect, and many may want to think. But I do think that they end up trading Contreras at some point, and Caro is the guy. But, like, I don't want to say it bought them time, Caro getting hurt. It kind of did.
It did.
Kind of got him a year.
It did. And I think ultimately, too, Caro is going to be a better defender. Like, you've seen Contreras come so far defensively, and it's really awesome to see. And he graded out really well last year. But I think ultimately, especially as Contreras gets closer to 30, there's going to be a big difference, I think, in what Caro is going to be able to bring to the table from a receiving and just, I think, every component there of the game. And look at what Gary, like their DH and the guy that they've been kind of rolling out there a lot is Gary Sanchez, a guy that can still catch too and isn't really catching. So I think it could be that type of role, and it's a bit more of a timeshare behind home plate. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing with Contreras is the bat, and they'll keep that in the lineup. And then I agree, I think they cash in later on, similar to like what we saw with the Corbin Burns there, and they got Caro right there waiting in the wings. It's unfortunate that that's the reality of it, but if that is your reality, have an Edgar Caro waiting in the wings, and I think it can make it a lot more tolerable for Brewers fans to put up with. Or sorry, what did I say?
Edgar.
Oh, Edgar. Jefferson Caro.
Caro.
Yes.
Can't keep confusing the Caro catchers, man.
No,
not related.
Not related, which is, I mean, they don't look very related, but I think it is wild that you got two guys in the Southern League that they were last year, were both in the Southern League named Caro and catchers, and we're the two best catchers in the league too, which is pretty cool. But another good question though.
Yeah. Next one comes from Alex Lyons, the guy on X, _Lions on X. Are the Mariners the most underrated system in Major League Baseball? And how close was Logan Evans to making the list? Two-parter. Let's start with the back question. How close was Logan Evans?
Evans is doing right now is awesome. And I know Alex has been in my replies about Logan Evans nonstop. And I get it, because he's like already quickly become the best pitching prospect in that system now, all of a sudden, pretty much, right? Unless I'm forgetting somebody. Like it's wild how thin the Mariners are pitching wise, and the way that he's been able to just emerge and be such a solid arm for them. I think you're seeing really good pitchability, and I think you're seeing a guy that's a high floor, high probability big league arm, kitchen sink type of approach. I just don't know if the stuff is enough for me as a top 100 guy. It is Javier Assad-ish though, and so like Assad's the kind of guy that you never put him in a top 100 because you're skeptical that it plays at the big league level, and then he has the pitchability to make it happen. I think Logan Evans can do that. But when I look at like a sheer stuff perspective, I just don't know if I see a top 100 guy just yet. Maybe through more starts, and maybe just to be honest, I got to watch him pitch more. Something will stand out to me a little bit more. I mean, the guy throws a slider, a sinker, a fastball, a curveball, a cutter, and a changeup. Yeah. And he throws them all for a strike at a pretty decent clip. Doesn't get a ton of whiff, does get a lot of ground balls, and strikes out more guys than you think because of the way that he can kind of get guys looking and sequence and just keep them off balance. I think even since we've done the Mariners' top prospects, he's climbed for sure, but just probably not possessing the stuff that I would look for in a top 100 guy. But sometimes those are the guys that end up never making the top 100 list and end up being better than a lot of the arms in the top 100 list. It's just, I don't know if I see enough stuff there at this point.
Yeah, well, it's also a matter of like, this is year one of the excellence sample. Like maybe he had a brief cameo, at the end of last year, but this year has really been his breakout. So, how much stock are you placing into 2 months at this point? And it's really tough to place that stock into 2 months when you have minimal pedigree, like what you have with Logan Evans. It's a different thing when you've got, a couple $1 million international free agent like Celestin or with Starling Caba that, made their way into the top 100. It's another thing when you have a pop-up college arm that is having an out-of-body experience or 2 months. Like I've seen plenty of those in high A and double A. I know you've seen plenty of those in high A and double A. And, it's hard to keep that sustained through the minor leagues up to the big leagues. Now, what I will say is Bryce Miller was not a first-round talent at A&M, and he's turned into a good major league starter. Brian Wu was at San Luis Obispo. He was not thought of as a first-round arm whatsoever, and he's kept that going to the big leagues. So if there's any organization where those guys thrive, it's in Logan Evans' situation. But, we need to see more than 2 months.
And those guys were top 100 prospects pretty quickly because I saw some characteristics in their stuff that I thought would translate to big league success, especially with the fastballs, right? You saw some very unique components and ridiculous whiff numbers, and those tied in. When I look at Evans, the sinker's unique enough to where I think he can be a guy that gets outs at the big league level. Getting 18 inches of horizontal is great, but below average extension, the velocity's jumped, which is nice, and it's gotten right to the point where it's just about average. But then all the other stuff, it's a bunch of average pitches, and he can mix and match those, and that's a solid potential back end of the rotation arm. I just struggle with the upside, and there's always risk that he doesn't locate as well as he gets to the higher levels and things like that, and then all of a sudden he's fighting to try to get into a rotation. There's a risk with anybody, but considering that risk, I want to have some upside to offset that. And with Logan Evans, it's what is the upside at that point beyond this? I think he's a big league starter. I think he'll probably be closer to a 4 or 5 starter. But yeah, just not enough there yet. I'm open-minded. No, I'm excited to watch him keep throwing, and maybe something will stand out to me as I watch some more starts. But at this point, just not enough there just yet. But the Mariners did it again. They found another good one, and I do think he'll be a good piece for them.
Now, part one of that question, are the Mariners the most underrated farm system in Major League Baseball?
So, let's look at just the top 100 list here. And we got 6 top 100 from the Mariners system.
I think they're all top 60.
Does anybody else have that many besides the Orioles?
Cubs, I think, have 7.
Have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they're up there. I guess define underrated. I like, what do they get any coverage? Like, do people not give them respect at this point? I guess they could be underrated from the respect that people aren't on Farmelo and Celestin as much, but I feel like Laz Montes is pretty big following. Colt Emerson has become I think almost overloved at points where people are like highlighting him as, the next number 1 guy potentially. And then Cole Young, we love him as much as anybody, and he's the 21st ranked prospect for us. So, but at the same time, everybody has Cole Young. He's a consensus top 50 prospect. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's underrated, but I do think that maybe there's a level of upside throughout this system that does potentially get overlooked, because we're not even talking about, Ty Pete, who's extremely talented, that we're not even talking about a Jonathan Clase and some of these other toolsy fun players, a Jeter Martinez, things like that. I think I'd probably go in another direction for most underrated, but I do think that people don't give the Mariners quite enough love farm system wise. But everybody knows about Cole Young, Colt Emerson, Harry Ford, and Lázaro Montes, I feel like.
Yeah, I think they're properly rated as one of the best. That's my thing. And our conversations about the Mariners it's a very top heavy farm system. Like, once you get outside the top 10, you're kind of grasping at straws, I feel like. And, that is where I think an organization pushes to underrated, where hey, the 20th best guy in that system is still a damn solid prospect. I don't know if that's the case with Seattle right now, but their top 8 is so good. It's so strong. And I feel like they are properly rated as one of the better farm systems in all of baseball.
I could see it getting there to the point where the depth starts to shine through and they become underrated. If you look at Ben Williamson keeps doing what he's doing. Yeah. We just talked about Logan Evans, another guy that, is obviously doing some really good things. And then, Jeter Martinez starts throwing the way that, we know he's potentially capable of. Yeah. Then I think I could start to see it more, but yeah, I do think that people are kind of aware of their guys, and they are a little bit top heavy, a little bit too top heavy to be, quote unquote underrated, I guess.
Yeah. Question number 4. This comes from @Darian Bustaman 2 on X. No Zac Veen ? Been out a couple weeks, but has looked rejuvenated. Do you want to
what do you think?
Do you want to share how long he was in the top 100?
He was in the back end for a week. He was holding the spot.
It was until when? So article was published, I want to say noon on Monday. He was in the top 100 until midnight on Sunday.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, right around then. There's been no information on the injury, by the way, that I can find anywhere. It's been weeks now, which is weird. I never realized how rough of a defender in the outfield he is. And that's really what kind of nudged me off. It's a culmination of things. We have 28 game sample where he looks good. He looks like Zac Veen has looked in the past. And that's exciting. And that's 100% elevated him. But it's 28 games. He's still running an in-zone contact rate of 73% in that stretch. He's still putting up big whiff and chase numbers against breaking balls. And I mean, nothing's jumping off the page from an exit velocity standpoint or anything like that. He's hitting the ball harder and he's elevating, which is the part that I really like. And there's a lot of things that I like here that have him rising up. And that's why he was right on the list until the very end. But we're talking about a guy here that still has some big struggles with breaking balls. Still, I think the underlying contact rates point towards maybe that normalizing a little bit more as the season progresses. Another injury as he's been out for a few weeks and we don't know what it is. And the defense put me over the edge. Like I was willing to tolerate all of that and throw him in the back end. Then I watched every fly ball that he has fielded this year or not fielded and last year. And like it wasn't Gabriel Gonzalez bad, but you can start to understand why a guy with elite speed is not playing center field.
Yeah.
Because that's what really sent me down that rabbit hole. I'm like, this guy is elite wheels. Gazelle out there potentially. Why is he not playing center field until you literally just can't try it anymore? He's 22. To already move as such a speedy guy out of there, and he was playing mostly left last year.
Yeah.
That was kind of telling. The reads are like it's happy feet, right? Like he looks super uncomfortable. Drifting, losing balls, double turning around. I was shocked to see how uncomfortable he was out there. And maybe he's just a guy that is not going to be able to track baseballs that well. That hurts a lot for a guy of his profile. Now he's for sure in a corner. He's got a slug. We've already established that he's not going to slug the way that we had once hoped, but he's starting to tap into more. Okay, well, then he needs to hit. We already established that he's not going to hit the way that we had once hoped either. So if it's average hit, average power, plus speed in left with average plate discipline, is that a top 100 prospect to you?
No.
That's ultimately where I landed. It killed me to disappoint you like that too, because I know that's
I mean, but
he might be really good. I don't know. That's just what I see right now. That's what I see.
Yeah. No, you pissed me off, so we're done. We'll do the second part of the mailbag tomorrow.
Yeah.
We've got a Brandon Sproat question. Before that, quick break. Okay, so at McAdam_Pat on X asked one of the 5-10 Brandon Sproat questions we got. Love seeing Sproat skyrocket to 50. Any shot we see him, Scott, and Tidwell all in the 2025 rotation for the Mets? I'll save you the answer. Yes. They'll all be in the 2025 rotation for the Mets. We were talking, is that on the call-up yesterday when we said Sproat could be up at the end of this year?
I think it was. Might have been on the Just Baseball show, but I 100% believe Sprout's going to be up by the end of this year. College arm, now pitching as efficiently as ever. We talked about the 3 consecutive 7-inning starts, only 4 walks in that span as opposed to 24 strikeouts. I cut up the highlights, by the way. I tweeted out just before we went live. So I'm excited for you to go watch that after we record. That outing on Sunday, comical stuff. We talked about it, but like really cutting up all the video again. The swings on his splinker, the swings on his fastball that touched 102, touched triple digits several times, and just to be throwing strikes the way that he is. He's going to be up soon, and he's obviously special arm. I think it's just about, can he stay healthy and can he continue this trend of throwing strikes? Tidwell, it's the same question. Can he continue his trend of throwing strikes? And his trend hasn't been as dramatic. I don't know if we'll see Tidwell this year, but we'll for sure see him by next year. Turns 23 in like 4 days, actually. He's been throwing really well overall. I think he definitely is going to be the last guy to get up there. Yeah. But I think what we're seeing from Tidwell is pretty impressive too. The walks have jumped a bit in AAA, but he's managed them well. We got 2 starts and trips, 11 2/3 innings, 8 walks, but only 2 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, which is weird. So unique stuff there, but he's been throwing well. Tidwell is the only one that he's going to have to be performing, and we'll see. He was another guy that was considered for the top 100, but just not quite. So that there's some similarities to McDermott. McDermott has a little bit more track record of just getting outs at the upper levels. But I do think that Tidwell could ultimately be better. There's just a lot of dependency on the slider cutter right now. But I think no doubt we see all three next year.
Imagine singing happy birthday to a guy named Blade. Happy early birthday, Blade. But like, happy birthday, dear Blade. Like that's crazy. Shout out you, Blade. It is a cool name. Happy early birthday. It's what is it? Laser, Blazer, dodgeball, right? I feel like Blade fits into dodgeball with global.
Also, if you're a pitcher that throws hard and just has nasty stuff,
Blade
and your name is Blade, that's sharp. I like it.
A couple of tough names. James Outman is a very tough name.
And Grant Balfour.
Yeah, Balfour is tough. Aaron Bummer is a really bad one for that. There was another one. Oh, man. I'll think of it. I don't know. Not right now. Let's jump to a two-parter from @UpNextMILB on X. And they ask two questions. I feel like they're both kind of quick answers here. Was Robert Calaz on the just missed list? And two, was Owen Murphy's TJ a big reason for putting Schwellenbach ahead of him? Or do you just like SS that much, Spencer Schwellenbach that much? Let's start with the Calaz one. Calaz is what? Big money Rocky? Robert Calaz?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hits the living crap out of the ball. So definitely was considered. I don't know if it was like a just missed, but he was probably like a just missed from the just missed. I mean, there's a lot to like there. And he's super, super toolsy, massive power potential. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's already popping 111s at the complex at 18 years old, but just a lot of whiff and a lot of slack to the swing. And I like a guy that I think people are going to get really excited about. They're going to see the numbers. They might see a couple the EVs from the Rockies development account, although I don't know if I've ever seen if they even have one. They might be one of the few teams that doesn't have the Rockies player development or team player development Twitter account, unless I'm mistaken. But he's super, super loud and it's exciting. But when you have those kind of whiff numbers at the complex and really seem to struggle to recognize breaking balls, and I can't bet on a hit tool that right now looks like a 20 or 30. So I that's the reason why he didn't quite make the cut, but hitting the ball as hard as pretty much any teenager in professional baseball. So that part is exciting. But whenever we put these complex guys in that do make the rankings, it's largely based on the mechanics of the swing and whether I think, and then the underlying data and whether we think that that's going to translate to low A success. And I just don't know if I see that with Calaz just yet. It could get there, and then he can make some adjustments in the offseason and be there, and then all of a sudden, boom, he explodes. But at this point, that swing just doesn't look like it's going to play in low A, and he's going to probably face some adversity and have to make some adjustments.
It feels like there needs to be a perfect storm for a guy at the complex to make the top 100. And there are three guys where the stars truly align and it becomes a perfect storm for them. And, there needs to be value really in like all facets, I feel like, for a complex guy to be, fully a top 100 prospect. I know that's kind of like a big name. Is that a big name in the card market or just a big name in the niche prospect circle on Twitter that I've found myself now?
What, Calaz?
Yeah.
I think a little bit of both. I think, and I think just people started to catch wind of the EVs and see some of the tape measure shots and then became a little bit of both. I think Dynasty people are excited about him too, because you have a guy that's hitting 111, 111 mile an hour shots at 18. And that the goal is to ultimately play in, Coors Field. So I think people get very excited about that. But yeah, I love the point that you bring up is like Calaz, like initially signed as a center fielder, already playing right. So he's going to have to really mash. Whereas Starlin Caba is one of the best defensive shortstops I've seen at the lower levels. With Felny Celestin, it's the same story, and a switch hitter with plus speed. Like those are the guys that are getting in. Even a Brailer Guerrero, big power as well, similar EVs, but he also is rarely swinging and missing through fastballs and already showing the ability to recognize spin. And I like the swing mechanics better. So, And also a little bit more athletic in the outfield. So those are the things that I think kind of go into it.
Can't transition to Brailer Guerrero just yet. We have to answer question 2 from Up Next MILB on X. Owen Murphy's TJ, big reason for Schwellenbach ahead of him. I feel like both those guys could have ended up in the top 100 if Murphy didn't blow out.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a conversation for sure. Murphy was going to be in. We talked about it. Like every time I watched that guy throw, I would text you, and I was just like, "This is crazy."
Yeah.
This fastball is, and we were talking Bryce Miller earlier. Like when I pulled just what that would compare to at the big league level was Bryce Miller, Christian Javier level of I think what his fastball does characteristically. We saw him dominate with that in high A, but at the same time, it is high A, and this was a 60 to 65% fastball usage. We've seen precedent of that working when you've got that kind of unique fastball, and it has helped that his velocity jumped at least even one tick this year before unfortunately going down. The slider being better helped. I think with Schwellenbach, you have a little bit more of a complete arsenal here. I think it would have been very close where there would have just been 1A, 1B, and I would have had to really dive into it. I would have had 3 more Owen Murphy starts to dive into from him this year, and I might have leaned towards him just because of the age. But yeah, so the Tommy John, like you have to also think about it this: while Murphy wasn't throwing for 3 weeks, Schwellenbach put together a couple of the best starts of his career, and then put together a quality start at the big league level. Whereas Murphy was not pitching and then went down with TJ. So it's a little bit hard to think about where I would have been had Murphy not gotten hurt. But I'd like to think that I probably would have been leaning towards Murphy, assuming that he was continuing to do this and maybe even got a couple starts in Double-A because of the youth. He's still just 20 years old. Fastball characteristics and the improvements we've seen with the slider. But it is 2 pitches there, whereas Schwellenbach can come at you with 5. And all of them are pretty solid. So it would have been really, really close. But I could have really seen myself go either way on that one. And unfortunately, the decision was kind of made for us with the news of Murphy going down.
Yeah. All right. Next question from @Mike 82,288,124 on X.
You prepared that for sure. You wrote those out. You had to. No way you pulled that like immediately and knew that was 8 million.
Dude, look at the iPad. There's no commas or anything in there. Can you see that?
It's 822,88124. I would not know that was.
Yeah, you just work backwards, man. You work backwards in clumps of 3, so you know like where to kind of start.
True,
so like 124 is the hundreds, 288 is the thousands, and then 82. So 82 million. Yeah, I was thinking on the fly. Give me a little bit of credit.
You think that's his favorite number?
82 million too. I was just going to rattle it off real quick. Yeah, it probably is. We can try calling it after this if we want. Do you think Brailer Guerrero could be a top 20 guy by next year, given his age, power, and speed? Again, Brailer Guerrero got his way onto the top 100 list. He is at the complex for Tampa. Mm-hmm. Top 20 is lofty.
Yes, that is lofty. Okay. Yeah, I don't know about that. I wouldn't say it's impossible. Anytime you got a guy this talented, anything can happen. But I do think it's lofty because he's going to have to do a lot and he's going to have to get pushed a lot. And if we know one thing about the Rays, they're not going to push. No. So he's probably going to finish the year in low A and get a little bit of run there. And I just don't know if there's going to be enough there. And then, next year he'll play again in low A. He'd have to really go crazy. And he could. But 20 is lofty. I think it would be similar to a Lazaro Montes type of ascension. Yes, he gives you some more value otherwise, but also Laz Montes, I think, it gives you a little bit more upside offensively from what we've already been able to see. And now that the way the hit tools come along. So I think he's a guy that could be in the top 60. But I think when you think about top 20, most of those guys, you got to look at the proximity aside from, Ethan Salas and
Walker Jenkins
players and the Walker Jenkins. Most of them either are closer or have at least a track record of mashing in full season ball for a little bit. I think it's going to take a little bit more time than that. But I do think that to the point of the question, he does have the skill set to be one of the big climbers in next year's top 100 and be one of those, biggest leapers in that group next year with what we're already seeing from him and the skill set that he has.
Yeah, and I mean, think about Montes. Like Montes is up 50 spots. He's still in the 40 area. So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, 20 is huge, but like a 50 spot climb is not out of the cards at all for a guy like Brailer Guerrero. So
no, especially if he starts to show 100%, and especially if he shows that he can potentially have an outside shot at sticking at center, or that he can play an above average corner, then all of a sudden I think that really elevates, the outlook on him too.
Yeah. Another Rays question here. This is Carson Williams related. What do you anticipate is the ceiling for Carson Williams after the improvements this year with the bat? At BRVMTE on Instagram. Go follow the Instagram. It is a budding presence, a young presence, but we're trying to grow that thing. And good question asked on the Instagram. The ceiling of Carson Williams. It's a fascinating question.
Very hard because he's so unique in the fact that he was so raw out of high school and just this, perform still at the same time. And now we're seeing him just grow and grow and grow. And also so much of the value comes from the glove. And then are we thinking like player comp ceiling, or are we thinking just like stat line and WAR?
I don't know if there's a player comp because he's so good defensively. The hit tool is a question. Like I'm thinking about the best defensive shortstops in baseball. That's really their value, like just their value. And then you have a Bobby Witt Jr., who is like a generational talent, and Carson is not that, respectfully. But Bobby Witt has a hit tool that Carson would dream of. Like, it's a guy that can hit the ball really hard and play really good defense. But, like, is he going to hit 250? That kind of thing.
Yeah, probably. Even with the improvements, I think will have him hitting around 250, 260 and walking at a great clip. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of like an offensive guy. Like if Matt Chapman was playing shortstop, and I'm not saying he's going to win like all of the Gold Gloves like that, but
yeah,
I'm trying like it's going to be like a Matt Chapman type of offensive game. I think maybe a little bit less aggressive. So it's really hard to I'll just try to say what I would see him potentially being as a player. It's like I think it's 30 home runs. Maybe sometimes even more than that if he has, and if he hits enough. I think it's 240, 250 batting average. And then I think he walks at a 10, 12% clip, which is going to help that OBP. And it's going to just be phenomenal defense that can get him to, 4 to 5 wins annually. Like I look at how Dan, and of course, if he's doing all those things, it could be 6, 7 wins when he's really, really having a great season. So the potential there from a WAR perspective is, one of the most valuable shortstops in baseball. From a traditional stats perspective, it might not look as sexy. And that's where I see like the Dansby Swanson similarities. I'm not calling them similar players, but where Dansby Swanson, nothing is jumping off of the page when you look at the slash line, but because of the defensive ability and because he still shows up to the ballpark every day and provides average offense for the most part or slightly above, you're going to finish the year with 4+ wins. I think he's an elevated version of that and a more volatile version of that at the same time. So I think the ceiling is 5, 6 wins, several years, but there's also that volatility aspect to it. Like, does he hit enough and all of that stuff? Does it end up looking more like Willy Adames offensively? And if it does, still the defensive value is going to keep him at, I still think, a multi-win player every single year. So I don't know if I can like define the ceiling, but it's probably 30 home runs, below average batting average, solid OBP and elite defense, and he'll mix in some bags. And I think that's going to be an extremely valuable player in the middle of your order.
Yeah, and Dansby had a 27 homer season in 21 and 25 in 2022. So, like, I feel like that is probably the closest comp that we've
more
got.
Homers, less average.
Yeah, I think so. And, like Dansby, probably a better separation of OBP. Like, Dansby doesn't walk with the best of them. I think, career walk rate is just under 9%. So, right around league average, he'll walk slightly above that. Like, I don't know. I think Swanson is probably the closest comp that you can get, but that's a damn good player that got $170 million.
100%. And I think it's not going to look totally different, but to the point of like the OPS might not be too different in like the median outcome. I think offensively, yeah. I think ultimately there's a lot more upside. And if the question's more geared towards the ceiling, I think the ceiling is 6 wins, right? Like, because he's hitting 30. If you're getting on base, let's say if you've got a WRC plus at like 125, which I think you could easily achieve, you're hitting 30 home runs and you got an OPS, above 800 or right around 800. And playing the defense that he plays, like it's going to be a 5-6 win player. So I think that is kind of the ceiling. What I do like about him now, though, is it seems like the floor has gotten so high, too, relative to what we thought it once may be. Because even if he's a 220, 230 hitter, he's still going to be a guy that I think ends up accumulating WAR with, because of the position and because of the defensive value and base stealing getting better and all those little things. So, that's why he jumped all the way up to 11 on our list. It's the floor and ceiling, and I'm excited about what he's got going on. And it seems like there's a good runway for him to take over that position in Tampa relatively soon.
100%. All right, 3 more questions. This one from an indie fella that actually comes to the ballpark a good bit. Brian Bosma 1 on X. 2 Pirates questions. Wants to see these guys in Indianapolis, I'm sure. Have you seen a drop-off in the stuff for Bubba Chandler, or do you believe his struggles are more injury-related? Also, any hope that Solomito can bounce back and become an impact starter in the major leagues? So 2-parter, both about guys that are arms in AA for the Pirates. Chandler fell, I think, about 10, 15 spots, and Solomito fell off the top 100.
Yeah, I'll start with Chandler. He came out. What was it? He came out because of the walks, right? Was it an injury scare?
It was
on
a
the
walk
17th?
thing, but he also had, I think it was like forearm tightness or something. But he was okay. Like he skipped a start, I think, and then he was back.
Skipped a start, came back, and it was 96. Whereas he's been more 97 and a half this year, 97 in a quarter. So I wouldn't be too alarmed to that, especially after skipping a start and maybe he was, guarding himself a little bit. I don't see an issue with the stuff in terms of the arm speed, how much it jumps out of his hand, the fastball quality, all that good stuff. I think the stuff problem is the secondaries. The only secondary that's looking like it can be a viable pitch for him right now is the changeup. The changeup's great. But because of command challenges, he's been pitching from behind, and he's had to throw his fastball 70% of the time, Jack.
Yeah.
70%. So the changeup feel has actually been great, but he's only thrown 55 changeups this year as opposed to 360 fastballs. He's thrown 91 cutters, and 51 of them have been balls. So the cutter's been unusable. It's a 44% strike rate, and even when it's in the strike zone, has not performed well. And then the only other pitch is the changeup that he's just not throwing much. So he's 70% fastball. It's a great fastball, but we know, especially once you get to AA, like you go fastball heavy, guys are going to start to clip you. And he's survived because the fastball is that good, but you can't pitch that way. So I think that it's been a combination of the command, which is, I think, conflated with the fastball dependency.
Yeah.
What do you like? 70% fastball usage, like
it's unusable in the big leagues. Like you cannot throw your fastball 70% of the time in the major leagues unless, and Chandler's is as close to being somewhat able to do so as there is in minor league baseball because it's just so damn good. But man, like, I don't know. I really don't think anybody can get away with 70% fastball usage.
No.
So, seeing that change is like very important, but also, he just hasn't really been finding the strike zone that well this year.
That's
and
the
I
problem too.
think that's important. If you're throwing 70% fastball, you should not have command issues. And the problem is he's having command issues throwing 70% fastball.
I see a lot of reliever risk here, man. And that's part of it. And I mean, the fastball is so freaking good though, that he could be a closer and a good one. I mean, we're talking 19 inches of vert with crazy spin and from a 5.8 release and a flat attack angle like that. He could go fastball only and out of the bullpen and succeed and mix in a couple changeups. But yeah, as Bubba Chandler, the starter, and we're not talking about like, oh, he's 19 anyway. He's going to be 22. So like, and I'm not saying that in the lens of like clock's ticking, but I'm saying it in the lens of if you're 22 and throwing the fastball 70% of the time and not having a feel to spin something, by the end of this season, we're going to start to look at like what is the long-term outlook and do they start to maybe shift what he's trying to do out there? And that's why he slips a little bit. I still think he's going to be a valuable arm for the Pirates one way or another, and that's why he's still in the top 100. On Solomito, it's 100% just the velocity, and we talked about it the other day. He fell off of the top 100 because of that. I'd love to keep him in there, but when it's 88, like the reason why he jumped into our top 100 was through the first half of the season, he was throwing 93, threw more innings than he'd ever thrown. So when the velocity slipped to 91, 90 at the end of the year, wasn't too worried about it because he was still getting outs. 88's a different beast. You no matter how funky you are, you can't get outs at 88. And what I'm concerned about is they haven't even had him throw a lot of innings so far this year.
I know.
Because I think they've known that the velo has been down through the bullpens. He's only been throwing in 3 and 4 inning spurts. And even in those 3 and 4 inning spurts, last time out, 2 innings. Yeah. He averaged 88 with the fastball. I don't know if they need to like shut him down or what the plan is here, but even the short inning spurt thing is not working. And they even tried it where he threw 1 inning on the 29th and then 2 innings on the first, and it didn't work. He was still down a full 2 ticks the next 2 days. So that's concerning. I think they pushed him way too hard last year, way too hard for a high school arm and a lefty like that. And once you saw the velocity go from 93 to 90, right about middle of August, he should have shut it down. And instead, he was still threw another 25 innings. And by the end of the year, he was down to 89. So I am a little bit worried about that for sure. I still think talent-wise, absolutely, he could be a big league arm and a good one. The slider is disgusting. He commands the heck out of it. That fastball plays great in the low 90s and the shape and the deception built in. But yeah, I can't have a guy throwing sub 90 on the top 100 list.
No, last 3 outings at this, or last 6 outings, pardon, just duration of the last 6 outings, 3, 3, 3, 1, 1, 2. And in his last 10 innings, he's punched out 3 and he's walked 7 in his last 10 innings. You can't punch out 3 in 10 innings and land on a top 100 list in 2024.
No. I hope the velo comes back though, because I think it's 100% just tied to that.
Yeah. 2 more questions here. We'll jump in with our guy who's been kicking ass on the social front, Elijah Evans. He sent me his question and he sent our social media group text the question. I think he really needs it answered because he knows the answer is going to be a good one. If they trade Luis Robert, parentheses, and Fetty / Kopech / other obvious ones, could the White Sox push for the best farm system in baseball or at least top 3? Elijah Ev 8 on X. Go follow him. He is an excellent follow for White Sox stuff and prospect stuff in general. Again, he has been doing an awesome stuff. He's been doing an awesome job on the call up social front. The answer is yes, and that's what he wants to hear. Elijah, yes. Are you happy that the answer is yes? Like they can be a top 3 system in baseball if they move Luis Robert. They have 5 guys on the top 100? Yeah, you got Colson Montgomery at 17, Noah Schultz at 32, Drew Thorpe at 43, Jairo Uriarte at 52, and Edgar Caro at 66. So that's 5. Lubob Gonzalez. Gonzalez looks really good. Love the swing adjustments he's made. They've got other guys in that system still. And then, Lubob with the control and everything, it's not free arb control, so it's not going to be game breaker in terms of the package. Like it's not gonna be Soto, but it's gonna be really freaking strong package, multiple top 100 guys. So they're gonna have at that point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'd have 7 top 100 guys, and then probably 10 guys that would fit into the top 150. That's gonna be a top 3 farm in baseball, and that's not even including Kopech, and those will be filler guys that give them depth in that system. Yeah, that's going to be a top. That's going to be a top system, and that's not including the fact that they're going to go draft in the top 5 this year too. Yeah, I think they have pick 5. Yeah. So from that lens too, it could be the best farm. Now, besides the Orioles, I guess. But the Orioles, with the graduations that they may be having too, although Mayo and Basayo won't graduate, and Mayo might. We'll see what happens, how they handle the second half of the year. But say Holiday and Mayo graduate, Sox would have the best farm system in baseball, I think. Yes. I can't think of a better one. Yeah, no, I think they would. The Cubs and Sox would be up there as 2 of the 3 or 4 best farm systems in all of baseball. Yes, which is a lot of talent coming up to Chicago. That's cool. And it worked for the Cubs last time. It didn't work for the White Sox last time. You're essentially agreeing to a 3-year, $55 million extension with Robert after this year. He makes 15 next year, and he makes 20 the following 2 years on club options. And I don't see any world where either of those club options are declined. So 3 for 55, that's going to be a steep price to pay. Last one that we've got for you is a draft related question. And I thought this was kind of a good one to wrap on. This from at 402 Cons on X. Where do you see the top draft prospects slotting in? So I'm going to throw you 4 names. Bazana, Condon, Burns, who is Burns clearly pitcher 1?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, I lean Burns. At this point, I'm going to do a lot more research to fully get and we're going to put like a big board together soon, especially now that we're done with this. I don't think, like, from what I've gathered, there's a lot of people out there that like Hagen Smith more.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll throw you pitcher 1, whether that be Burns or Hagen Smith. And then I'll throw you Connor Griffin as well for a high school guy, just mix in the high school guy. So Let's start with Bazana. But where does Bazana slot in to like this top 100 is currently constructed? If you were to do it right now.
As currently constructed, 3.
Really?
You and I would have a long conversation about Travis Bazana versus Jackson Holiday.
Jeez.
And that's, again, it's not an indictment on Holiday.
No, he's just that good.
It's just that Holiday may not be the consensus, unstoppable number 1 guy. And he's still very close. But Bazana and what he's doing and his proximity and the speed now that he brings to the table. I do have some questions about like defensively, but I think if they start running him out in center field or something, he looks good there. That would be really exciting. It would be really close between him and Jackson Holiday, I think. And I might still lean Holiday. It would be right there as either 3A or 3B, I would say.
The slash is absurd. This year, 57 games in the Pac-12. Bazana slashed 419, 580, 951. It's a 1531 OPS. And this, smaller in stature second baseman had a 28 homer season for Oregon State. Like,
that's the thing. He's got more power than Holiday, I think, too. So
yeah.
And also, he's only a year older than Jackson Holiday.
There you go.
So he'd probably slot in at 3.
Got you. Condon, where do you see him?
The defensive thing is, again, I think it's better than it should be considering he's barely played college baseball and it's only his second season and he's bounced around and he's 6'6", but there still is some long-term questions defensively. And I'm not quite sure, where he ultimately would play.
Yeah.
And that does make things a little bit tough. I would like to say somewhere in the, like, Mayo's going to have the edge over him, I think.
I went to 10, slotted in between Jason and
that's pretty much where I'm looking. I was looking right in the 9 to 11 range between Jason. I think Jason just also what he's doing right now on rehab is crazy. This guy's been itching Jason Dominguez to get back on the field. He's been ready. I think Dominguez is so underrated at this point. I'd probably put him in at 10.
Okay.
At 10. But although we haven't talked too much about it, and we'll probably do another little segment on the next episode, just briefly talking about some of the big climbers and why. But Emmanuel Rodriguez, like, I've just watching the defensive video and seeing that he could stick in center and what he's done offensively, like, he's jumped a lot, in my opinion. Yeah. So I think it would either be right before Emmanuel or right after.
Okay. Pitcher 1, whether that be Burns or Hagen Smith. I was just kind of like laying the groundwork for you in my head before I even asked you. Skeens is ahead, obviously. Job is ahead, obviously. Then we get to Andrew Painter at 16. I'll take Painter over any of these 2 arms, Burns or Smith. And then you get to Christian Scott. I take Scott over those guys.
Really?
I think so. I go to Cade Horton as like kind of the one that it stacks up with. I personally, without any data in front of me, just like watching both these guys throw several times here this year, I would say Burns gets the slight edge over Horton because it's 100, because that slider is nasty. And like he can lose the strike zone at points, and he's had a homer problem at points this year. Smith, it would be a toss-up for me between Cade and Hagen Smith.
I agree with you. I'm probably taking both over Horton from an upside perspective. Smith is a tough one for me because I mean, you see the angle that he creates as a lefty,
Yeah,
and
it's
you see what he
crazy.
can do. But with the pitching prospects, I need to see them do it professionally, because so much of what maybe works for them in college may not work to the same degree at the big league level. And
Yeah.
I don't have the exact amount, like I don't have nearly as much information data wise as I do with the minor league guys. So it makes it a little bit harder. That said, from the left side there, and the whiff that he gets on the fastball and the slider, and I wish the changeup flashed a little bit more, but at least he's been willing to throw it a little bit.
Yeah.
I would put those guys over Horton just because of the upside, the stuff. They just got pitches that are just better than what Horton has to offer. But I do think it gets really interesting with Christian Scott. If you start to think about it, though, like Christian Scott's fastball angle, what he creates, I think compensates for the gap in velocity. And the velocity is not even that big of a gap.
No.
He's already done it at the big league level. Yeah, I think he would slot right behind. They'd both slot right behind Christian Scott for me, but just ahead of Cade Horton.
Yeah, I think so. And then the last one, I mean, you want to talk about lack of data. High school guy, Connor Griffin. Where's he?
He's tooled up. I would say him and Rayner kind of package them together here. Guys, I need to see a little bit more of to be fully transparent.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you compare that to Colson Montgomery?
I don't think there is a way to compare it.
I'd probably say right in the like Max Clark, right? Like
In that area.
If I like what I've seen from Connor Griffin as I do more of a dive in the next month, which I'm assuming I will, and Clark's good. He's 19th overall here. I'd say right in that area, like the 15 to 19 range, where you have Lawler, Painter, Colson Montgomery, Ethan Salas, Max Clark. I kind of look at the Ethan Salas, Max Clark range as a spot where I could see them both kind of slotting into there.
Yeah.
Those were great questions.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. We're going to dive more into the draft. And again, for transparency's sake, like updating the top 100 here, that's where my focus has been. So I've not been doing my, as much research and watching of the college guys and high school guys as I should. So that's kind of going to be the next thing for us here. And I'm excited to do that as we continue to churn out the team top prospect list. Of course, go check out the full top 100. If you have any other questions on Twitter, I'll try to get to those. And we'll probably talk a little bit, just probably spend 10 minutes on just some of the big climbers and why we saw those guys make a huge climb. But thank you for all the amazing questions. If you could leave a rating, help us grow the show, leave a quick review, that would be great. Or if you're on Spotify, all you have to do is just click the little 5-star thing. Subscribe on YouTube. We are putting stuff out on there consistently. And we'll have some player interviews coming up. I know so we're supposed to have a potential fun Royals pitcher. I don't want to say anything now because just sometimes things come up and I don't want to promise. But the one thing I can promise is we're gonna shoot the shit with Griffin on Monday. Griffin Conine, I will make sure he no matter what is on Monday. He's not getting out of this one. Can't wait to ask him about how 109 at like 24 degrees didn't get out to center field. So we can pest him about that. But I actually am very excited to get into a bunch of different topics with him that, we probably wouldn't get into as much with some other players because we want to talk more about that player with Griff. Like, don't really need to talk about his career and his journey. It'll bake into it, but I'm excited to talk to him about, like, he's been diving into the bat speed stuff on Savant and like some of the things that he pulled away from that, ABS questions. Like, I'm just excited to be able to ask, I think, peel back the curtain a little bit further than we normally do. And kind of just shoot straight with someone that, I could literally ask him, why'd you strike out so much last week? And we'll give an actual thoughtful explanation as to why. So like that stuff like that is always fun. So look out for that episode on Monday. And, we might even try to field some questions that you might have as it pertains to like the minor leagues development, things like that I know Griff will be happy to answer. Any final thoughts, Jack?
I don't think so. This was a great assortment of questions from our friends on Twitter and on Instagram. So we really appreciate that. And like we're really appreciative of, every time you guys come out and ask a question, because in reality, like, we don't talk into the microphone about prospects if you don't have questions that are burning. And like, usually we, have those internally and we talk about them, but it's way more fun to answer the questions directly.
You said it. You nailed it there. And I mean, I'm seeing the comments on YouTube and just the engagement and the conversations that maybe spur out of this. Other people that are listening to the show then have a conversation about something that we talked about. And like, I love seeing the interaction. The prospect community is just has a very special place in my heart. And it's just people that truly love it. I think everybody, well, that listens to this stuff likes baseball, but when it comes to like the prospect stuff, you can tell it's just a different level of love that kind of matches ours. And it's a cool connection to feel with you, the listener. So I really appreciate those who have taken the time to ask questions and taken the time to comment and give us feedback. And if you don't, you just listen all the time, I appreciate the hell out of you too. But we just don't know about you other than the numbers, but I appreciate everybody. And it's been always great interacting, and we'll continue to field as many questions as we can when we do these mailbag episodes. And of course, if you want to make sure you get your questions answered, you can subscribe to the bonus episodes in the episode description. We will talk prospects with you later this week.